Hello, everyone. This is Tom Fox. I'm the Compliance Evangelist, and I'd like to welcome you to an exciting new podcast series, Popcorn and Compliance at the Movies with Tom Fox and Jay Rosen. In this podcast series, Jay and I are going to take a look at movies, both classic and contemporary movies for compliance lessons, business lessons, leadership lessons, and life lessons. This podcast series is a new offering from the Compliance Podcast Network. And today it is sponsored by One Stone Creative.
If you are enjoying this show, you might enjoy hosting your own. As an expert in your field, you have skills, knowledge, and insight that can help you expand your practice, meet new people, and create amazing content to share with the world. In as little as 2 hours a week, you can dramatically change how you promote, fill, and position your business. And One Stone Creative can show you how. Learn more at onestonecreative.net.
In this introductory 5-part, 1-week podcast series, Jay and I take a look at the intersection of Star Wars and compliance. This is truly one of our favorite movie series, and I know that you will enjoy it too, as Jay and I take a look at how Star Wars, the movies, can inform your compliance program. Popcorn and Compliance is a new offering of the Compliance Podcast Network. Today we conclude our series by taking a look at the standalone film Rogue One. Hello everyone, this is Tom Fox back again with Jay Rosen for part 5 of our 5-part exploration of the intersection of compliance and the Star Wars universe. Each day this week we have taken a different Star Wars movie and we have sliced it and diced it from the screenwriter perspective of Jay Rosen, and then we've talked about it from the compliance perspective and what lesson you might draw from one of the points of the movie. Today we're going to review Rogue One, which is really outside the canon in terms of being a numbered episode. In many ways, it was a prequel to A New Hope. And Jay, what can you tell us about the movie Rogue One?
Sure. So, as you said, Tom, this story takes place in the same Star Wars universe, and it's about the time right before episode 4, A New Hope. We meet a scientist named Galen Erso and his family who are hiding on a planet called Lamu. Imperial weapons developer Orson Krennic arrives to press him into completing the Death Star. Galen's wife, Lyra, is killed in the confrontation, while their daughter, Jyn, escapes and is rescued by rebel Saul Guerrera. 15 years later, a cargo pilot named Bodhi Rook defects from the Empire, taking a holographic message recorded by Galen to Guerrera on the desert moon of Jedha. Rebel intelligence officer Cassian Andor frees Jyn from an Imperial labor camp at Wobani before bringing her to the rebel leader Mon Mothma, who convinces her to find and rescue Galen so the Alliance can learn more about the Death Star. Cassian is covertly ordered to kill Galen rather than extract him. Jyn, Cassian, and a reprogrammed Imperial droid, K2SO, travel to Jedha, where the Empire is removing kyber crystals to power its new Death Star. Guerrera and his partisans oppose them in an armed insurgency. With the aid of a blind spiritual warrior, Chirrut Imwe, and his mercenary friend Baz Malbus, Jyn makes contact with Guerrera, who has been holding Rook captive. Guerrera shows her the message in which Galen reveals he has built a vulnerability into the Death Star and directs them to retrieve the schematic databank on the planet Scarif. On the Death Star, Krennic orders a low-powered test shot, which destroys Jedha's capital. Jyn and her group take Rook and flee the moon, but Guerrera remains to die with his city. Grand Moff Tarkin, who we've seen before in Episode 4, congratulates Krennic before using Rook's defection and security leak as a pretext to take control of the project. Rook leads the group to Galen's facility where Cassian chooses not to kill him. Jyn makes her presence known just as rebel bombers attacked. Galen is wounded and dies in his daughter's arm before she escapes with her crew on board a stolen cargo shuttle. Jyn plans to steal the Death Star schematics, but it doesn't gain the Alliance Council's approval. Jyn leads a small squad of rebels, volunteers on a raid. Arriving at Scarif on the stolen Imperial ship, which Rook dubs Rogue One, a disguised Jyn and Cassian enter the base with K2SO, while the other rebels attack the resident Imperial garrison as a distraction. K2SO sacrifices himself so Jyn and Cassian can retrieve the data. Imwe is killed after activating the master communication switch to the rebel fleet, and Malbus dies in the battle. Rook is killed by a grenade after informing the rebel fleet that it must deactivate the shield around the planet to allow the transmission of the schematics. Jyn and Cassian obtain the schematics but are ambushed by Krennic, who is eventually shot and wounded by Cassian. Jyn transmits the schematics to the rebel command ship, and the Death Star enters orbit above, where Tarkin uses another low-power shot to destroy the base, killing Krennic, Cassian, and Jyn. The rebel fleet appears to jump to hyperspace, but many of the ships are intercepted by Vader's flagship. Vader boards the rebel command ship and attempts to regain the schematics, but a small starship escapes from the plans on board. And now we see aboard this fleeing ship Princess Leia, who declares that the schematics will provide a new hope for the rebellion.
Well, that's a great segue, Jay, because I want to use Rogue One, specifically the name, to talk about one of what I think is one of the most dangerous myths in compliance, and that's the myth of the rogue employee. As long as 24 years ago, Lynn Payne wrote about the myth of the rogue employee in an article for the Harvard Business Review entitled Managing for Organizational Integrity. She said that executives are quick to describe any wrongdoing as an isolated incident, the work of a rogue employee. The thought that companies could bear any responsibility for an individual's misdeeds never enters their minds. Ethics, after all, has nothing to do with management. But in fact, ethics has everything to do with management. I think the important thing to remember is that illegal conduct under a law such as the FCPA never occurs in a vacuum. There are always other employees with whom the recalcitrant employee interacts. There are financial controls in place to protect against misconduct, which have to be overridden. There are reporting mechanisms for employees to report suspicious activities, raise your hand, hotlines, etc. There's likely to be someone in the organization who is close enough to the bad actor or responsible for the conduct of the bad actor, or who should have suspected the actor was engaged in misconduct. The more sophisticated the scheme, the more actors are always involved, and the more controls are always overridden. As the misconduct becomes more complicated, such as in the case of bribery or antitrust violations, the schemes require additional actors and raise additional red flags, or there are persons in senior management who are in a position to know of such misconduct. There's really no instance I can think of where an employee just on their own was able to generate enough money to pay a bribe that got a contract. So the myth of the rogue employee is really dangerous, Jay, because it gives companies an out for not actually doing compliance through the operationalization of compliance to protect the organization.
One thing that this makes me think of, Tom, is that although there is the myth of the rogue employee, it seems that in the past few years, there's been more of a focus of trying to find individuals accountable for all sorts of malfeasance that we've seen in the FCPA sector, as well as other, corporate misdeeds. So how do you square that with individual accountability, but not having a rogue employee?
So I think they actually line up as supplementary to each other, Jay. A corporation acts through its employees. even though in its infinite wisdom, the Supreme Court has said corporations are employees, they really only act through individuals, through human beings. And as long as it's people who are engaging in the bribery and corruption, that's going to put the corporation under sanction. The employees who engage in this have to develop, as I said, a pot of money to pay a bribe. And to do so, they had to steal that money from somewhere, whether they stole it from the corporation, whether they cheated on their expense accounts, whether they stole it from petty cash, whether they claimed that they were giving discounts to customers and then rebating the difference. It really doesn't matter. There has to be a pot of money created. It's individuals who create that money. And the Department of Justice, I think, in the Yates memo, starting in September 2015 up till literally a couple of weeks ago when Rod Rosenstein announced the new FCPA corporate enforcement policy, was making it clear that they expect corporations to thoroughly investigate cases, and if there's conduct of individuals, they expect that information to be turned over to the government as a part of an overall settlement.
This wraps up our week of Star Wars themed compliance takes. And so on behalf of Tom Fox, the compliance evangelist, and myself, Jay Rosen, we thank you for joining us for our fifth part in the series celebrating the release of the new Star Wars movie. We just took a look at Rogue One, and we took a look at the myth of the rogue employee. Thanks so much for joining us.
Hello, everyone. This is Tom Fox again. I'd like to thank you for listening to this part 5 of our special 5-part introductory series of Popcorn and Compliance, where Jay and I took a look at the Star Wars movies in the context of and in their intersection with your best practices compliance program. If you have any questions of Jay, you can email him at jrosen at Affiliated Monitors. I'm Tom Fox, and you can email me at tfox@tfoxlaw.com. I hope you'll join Jay and I again as we take another look at one of our favorite movies in the context of compliance lessons, business lessons, leadership lessons, and perhaps some life lessons too. Our next offering will be on the biography of Freddie Mercury and the group Queen in Bohemian Rhapsody. I hope you'll join us, and I hope you will rate this podcast if you have listened to it on iTunes. Popcorn and Compliance is an offering of the Compliance Podcast Network.